What point am I trying to get across?
People react differently.
That we all handle things differently, absolutely. What else? What's the point of that activity, other than we all handle things differently?
You're not alone.
You're not alone in the way you handle things, yeah?
Listen.
What?
Listen.
Listen, yeah. Were any of you surprised at where other people in here went for some of the questions? Were you like, oh, I wouldn't have known that about that person? Was anyone surprised? I like it doing this with groups that are really close to each other because they're like, no way, you'd be over there, you know, and they get this chance to really like challenge what they believe that their friends would do, right? Because here's the thing, basically in those first two questions, we ask, well, if you're upset about something, are you going to talk about it or keep it to yourself? And then the second question is like, well, if you're really upset about something, are you talking about it or keeping it to yourself? And there's so many people that change places, right? And a lot of you said, like, it depends on the situation. So for so many of us, like, say I have a friend who last month went through a really bad breakup, and she just wanted a hug, and she just wanted to talk about it all the time, right? Well, then last week, she got sexually assaulted. And she doesn't want me to hug her, and in fact, she's sort of withdrawing from people and doesn't want to talk about it at all, right? But if I was going on my past experience with her going through a problem, I would be responding in the wrong way. So that's a really good point that we try to make with this activity, is that not only are we all different from each other in the way that we react, but also we're different depending on the situation that we've just gone through. Everyone's gonna sort of change up the way that they respond in those situations. We also like to pinpoint that it's not always helpful to get advice from people. A lot of times we want someone to go over options, but to help us come up with those best options, right? So we know that these issues are about somebody having taken power and control away from them. And so the best thing that we can do in response to this is to give them back that power and control. And in all of the ways that we respond, we can do that, right? Now I know that you guys all have had people, almost all of you, have had people come share these things with you. And so you've probably done a lot of these things already. So this might give you just a different perspective to look at, or there might be pieces that are different than what you've done before, or this might just be totally validating what you did right in the first place, right? But these are the ways that ideally we would like for people to respond when somebody comes forward. This is what we do in the care office, right? The only time that we are not all about letting the other person make their decisions is if there is a medical need in that moment. If they are bleeding, if they are hurt, and they need medical attention, that is time to call 911, right? But aside from that, it is all about ensuring that they are feeling like they have power and control back, right? So not assuming that I know what's best for them. I know what I would like to see happen for people, but that doesn't mean that that's the right answer for that person. And ultimately, they are the one that have to live with the decisions that they make and the choices that they make, right? Not me. So really being there to listen and not asking questions. The reason that we say not asking questions, we know that asking questions is a natural reaction. Like, we're trying to figure out how something so awful could happen, and we want to like make sense of it, right? But what I know is that like 99% of the people that I work with are blaming themselves about what happened because they were in the wrong place, because they said the wrong thing, because they did whatever it is that they are trying to blame themselves about what happened. If we ask questions, we may have really good intentions, but it could come across really easily as blaming to them. And so in the care office, we don't ask questions, we just accept what they're offering us and believe them, right? We also, when we are listening to them, we show fully that we are listening to them. We are attentive with our nonverbals, we are facing them. I have this really bad tendency because I'm sort of always on call. I have a tendency of like checking my phone or always having my phone out. There are times where literally I have to put my phone someplace where I can't even like see it because the buzz or it lighting up showing that I have a text message would be too distracting to me, so I literally will put it away because I want them to know I am fully there with them. The other piece is not going in for that hug. If you are a hugger, I am not a hugger personally, like that's not my go-to thing, but If I feel like somebody might want a hug, I will ask them, and I will ask them in a way that gives them permission to say no. Because I don't want them to feel like they have to have a hug because I need that, right? So respecting physical space, because these issues are so often about their physical boundaries being violated. But the biggest thing is that I want people to know how much I appreciate when they come to me with their story, because that is a gift, honestly. There is nothing about me that automatically deserves for people to trust me. Like you were saying, like very often after these issues, people have trust issues. It makes sense, right? Their trust has been violated in a huge way. And so for somebody to choose to share with me their story is a gift. And I want them to know that I appreciate that and I understand that that's a gift. And so I usually start by thanking them for sharing that with me. And I don't judge. I don't judge the situation. I don't judge their reaction, even when it's different than what I would expect. I know that people can react in a lot of different ways to trauma. And so what we like to say around the care office is that is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. That makes sense given what you just told me happened. The next is really about letting them make their own decisions. So this is especially pertinent when it comes to people very often think if someone is sexually assaulted that they should automatically make a police report. And along that same lines, people also think that if they are talking to somebody that's in an abusive relationship, that they have to get out of the relationship. It has to be over, right? And so really, I want to have a conversation for a few minutes about why that might not be the right answer for everyone, right? So making a police report can be great. It can be healing for somebody if they've been sexually assaulted. It can be a good opportunity to possibly hold a rapist accountable, right? And we all want that. But why might it not be the right answer for everyone? What might be difficult for somebody about making a police report?
They don't want other people judging them.
Right, they might not want to be judged.
They don't want to relive the event.
Yes, they have to, when you make a police report, it's not just like, hey, police officer, someone raped me. Okay, I'll go do that investigation. No, they have to go through like in detail what it is that happened to them.
Usually it's like somebody that you know.
Yes.
And you don't really want to get them in trouble.
Yeah, on college campuses, 90% of the time, it's somebody that they know. And there's that feeling of like, I will ruin their life if I make a police report. You don't want them to get in trouble. You don't want anything to happen. Yeah, very frequently.
And it just makes it really real. It's like you could probably, if you didn't report it, which I mean you should, if you don't report it, you can probably eventually like push it away and kind of forget it happened. But if you have to do a police report, it dredges it back up and you're always talking about it and you're always dealing with it.
Right, yeah, it can make it real on a different level and it also keeps it alive for a really long time. Absolutely.
Oh, it kind of like, it could make the situation worse, depending on if like you're in a relationship or you're not, like with the other person, it could make the situation worse.
Yes, absolutely. It can make things feel so much worse than if you just, like you said, like pretend it didn't happen or pretend it happened, but it just isn't going to affect you.
You can get scared that they will attack you again.
Right, there could be a fear of retaliation. Absolutely.
There's always so much drama with that situation and a lot of like self-doubt that they really don't want to bring unnecessary drama to it.
Absolutely. So it can feel like a lot of drama. And quite honestly, like as students especially, you guys have so many responsibilities, right? Like you have to go to class, you probably have clubs you're a part of, you have groups, some of you are part of Greek organizations. Like it is really difficult to put all of that to the side because you have to do an investigation with the police now, right? Like you have to carve out time in a very busy schedule when really most people just want to forget that it happened. Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, like she was saying, if you file a police report and it doesn't like end up how you wanted it to, so they don't get jail time or anything, then they could come back and like.
Absolutely. And even think about like not even the direct threats, but living in a small community, like a campus, right? Like it is really easy for people's social circles to be swayed by that sort of thing happening, right?
Can it also like be fueled by double jeopardy? Like if you try to charge the person, they don't get charged. Like How does that work again? I forgot.
Yeah, so if the courts decide to charge someone, which doesn't happen all that frequently because there needs to be a very high level of evidence that's present, and usually these are issues that involve just two people. But if it goes forward to court, then they can only charge someone once with that crime. They can't come back 6 months later when there's new evidence and recharge them, right? Let me ask you guys a question though. How many of you would be really excited right now about talking to a police officer in uniform about the most recent time that you were physically intimate with someone? How many of you want to do that? Sex or not sex, whatever it was. Like, we're not really interested in doing that, much less if it were a traumatic incident that happened, right? Like, that sounds really intimidating and awful, right? So there's a lot of great police officers out there, but there can also be some that are really not supportive. And so there's a lot of reasons for which it might be really hard and might not be the right thing for someone to do to make that police report.
My cousin was raped when she was 14, and the police officer she reported it to called her a whore.
Oh, that's awful.
And convinced her not to go forward with the report like halfway through.
Oh my gosh.
So,
And you know, those stories happen. We know there's a lot of great police officers out there, but you know, even when that happens once, it's too many times. That's awful. All right, so what about leaving an abusive relationship? You know, I think, let me start off with, our society very often, that's the first question when it comes to abusive relationships. Like, why don't they just leave, right? And that's kind of an unfair perspective because it puts the responsibility of ending the abuse on the person who's not causing the abuse, the person who's already their whole life is sort of disrupted by the abuse, and it's saying, well, why don't they just end it, right? And that's everybody's first question, instead of the first question being what it really should be of, why would somebody hurt the person they say they love the most? Like, why isn't that society's first question? Either way, it's important for us to know what those barriers are that make it difficult, make it not the right answer for someone to leave the relationship. What are some of those barriers?
They've fallen in love.
Yeah, it could be love, absolutely.
Fear.
Fear? What are some of the fears they might have?
Well, if they leave, they'll probably be scared they'll get stalked and harassed, and you could retaliate just like the other
Mhm.
situation with reporting. And I think maybe because of all of a lot of times there's a lot of persuasion and there's a lot of like blame put on the victim that they feel as if they need that person regardless of the
Right.
abuse.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that brainwashing that happens with the isolation and the repeated messages, right? But yeah, there could be also fear. Do you guys know the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship of somebody possibly having an attempt on their life being made? Do you know when that is?
holidays?
It's when they're leaving, right? So if we say to a friend, you need to get out of that relationship, we're kind of telling them they need to put themselves at a pretty high level of risk. They have to be ready for that. That has to be their decision, right? So yeah.
Usually like the abuse starts like later,
Mhm.
so they like have a fear of starting over.
Right, so a fear, and people feel very invested, right? Like, I've invested time, I've
to
invested
To know
myself.
somebody else, they wanna like just stay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Financial security.
Financial security, absolutely. And it feels a lot like that doesn't play out on campus, but it actually does. Like, a lot of times people will be like, well, if I leave this person, I've loaned them hundreds of dollars at this point that I wouldn't see again, right? Like things like that, or maybe they live together and the difficulty in breaking a lease, right?
Like children can make it complicated if you have children with the person.
Absolutely. Children, interestingly, are the number one reason why people stay in a relationship. Do you know what the number one reason is that people will leave an abusive relationship? Children, yeah, isn't that interesting? And again, reinforces those socialization messages because people are more willing to do things on behalf of their children than for themselves, right? Yes.
Well, when you're in an abusive relationship, they completely isolate you too, like from your friends, family, and everything.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to like reach out to somebody.
Right, and when you are ready to disconnect, who is going to be there? Who is going to be there to spend Saturday nights with? You know, who's going to be there for you to like get support from and cry on their shoulder, right? So yeah, that isolation can be a huge part of it too. All right, so that's, I know that I sort of went off for a while on that, but it's important that we realize that even though we may personally want them to make those decisions, it has to be what's right for them. And we have to understand why they might make a different decision than what we maybe think they should do, or what society in general maybe thinks they should do. Using I statements about our own personal concerns, like, I would love to bring you over to the care office. You know, I'm concerned about how you're doing, really owning that for yourself instead of being like, you're acting crazy right now. You're withdrawing from everyone. Really being like, I'm concerned about what I see in your behavior. You know, owning those behaviors. And then not sharing somebody else's story. Because you know what? When a friend comes to us with this, it hurts us, right? We love our friends. We want them to be in a good place. We don't want bad things happening to them. It's difficult. But if we turn around and talk to other people about it, getting support that we need, it can start spreading the story out in a way that takes away power and control again, even more, right? So care is a really safe place that you guys can come and talk to someone about a friend going through this sort of thing where we don't share the story anywhere, right? That's just gonna stay put. And being aware of the confidential resources like care and knowing who I am specifically, Jen. You can bring people in to come see us, but also remember that policy I mentioned on Monday, like letting somebody know, hey, staff and faculty and RAs, they have to report if they hear something's happened. Except for, where are the 3 exceptions?
Health promotion, care, and counseling center.
Yes, care, the health center, and that includes health promotion, and then the counseling center. So 2nd floor of DePaul Hall and that little offshoot in the student rec center. Those are the safe places you can go talk to someone about these things without initiating one of those reports, right? But really, oh, and then there's following up. And I made this blank. I can't even remember how many times I make this blank, but the reason is, so what will happen for people when they tell a friend? With a lot of these issues, our initial impulse is to not talk about it and to push it down, right? And so that sort of becomes their coping skill. So say that I'm gonna come talk to you about what's happened to me, right? And in that moment, you are saying all the right things, you are giving me the right options, you are telling me I'm not crazy, and that feels really good because I have felt crazy and alone with all these feelings, right? So you're saying all of that, and then, you know, we both go our own way, we've got class to go to or whatever, and as I walk away, I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? Is she gonna judge me now? Is she feeling pity for me? She's probably feeling pity for me. I start to feel lots of shame. I start to wonder if you're gonna tell other people about it, because now, oh my gosh, somebody else knows this story, and is it gonna get out? And is everybody gonna judge me? And are people not gonna believe me? Maybe she doesn't believe me. Right? So this is what I call the emotional hangover. In the moment, it feels really good to be talking to someone about it, but when I walk away, all of that negativity, all of that self-blame pops up and makes me feel awful. So it is really important to follow up with me later, right? Like the next day, coming to me and not just being like, hey, how you doing? Because we ask that all the time and don't really mean it. We don't really want an answer, right? But saying, how are you doing, Jen, about what you told me yesterday? Because I've been thinking about that, and I want you to know that I'm still here for you, and anytime you need to talk. Because specifically giving me permission and saying, I am still safe, helps me counter all of those negative messages I'm telling myself, right? So that's why we make it blank so many times, maybe 5 times.